that we expect you to adhere to. And should you witness or experience code of conduct violations, please report it, and our code of conduct committee will deal with them. And also, the session will be recorded and will be available in YouTube and will also be posted to Zenodo in near future. And finally, we are very grateful for our sponsors who have provided their support for this conference. We have 3 exciting presentations lined up for the next 55 minutes. After each presentation, there should be time for a couple of questions to the presenters. And if you have questions you would like to ask, please use the Q&A button, which should be available to you in the Zoom interface. And if there are lots of questions, the presenters will be available to provide their answers after the session in a Google Doc that's linked to the chat program. But now on to our first presentations, which will be about the development of a national level institutional repository cloud service for Japanese OpenScience. And it will be presented by Masaharu Hayashi and his colleagues from the National Institute of Informatics in Japan. And Masaharu, the floor is yours. So you can start your presentation. We don't see you right now. So you can start. Okay, we can see your slides, so that should be okay.
Can you see my slide? Only my slide?
Okay. Yes, we can see your slides.
Okay, thank you. Let's talk about the development of a national level institutional repository cloud service for open science. In this presentation, first, I'm going to talk about Gyrocloud. This is an instant repository cloud service in Japan. We are currently developing a new version of Gyrocloud. And I will talk about new version. First, I'm going to talk about Gyrocloud current status. Next, I will introduce a new version of Gyrocloud. Then I will show data migration plan about the new version of Gyrocloud. After that, I'm going to talk about the development of Gyrocloud. Finally, I will make a summary and talk about future plan. Next slide. And let's talk about Gyrocloud. Gyrocloud service that will provide instant repository functionality starting in 2012. Gyrocloud is a joint operation service with JP Core, a repository committee whose members are mainly university libraries that operate institutional repository, Gyrocloud. Gyrocloud is a service for JP Core member in JP member. In Gyrocloud, the institute operation, the initial repository is in charge of item management and usage statistics management and the site design, etc. And I control system operation and the server management. And the JP Core supports the institution and the committee management, and also support development support. And the NII develop Gyrocloud system. And Gyrocloud is national level instance repository cloud service. This graph shows the number of institutions building instance repository in Japan. First repository in Japan began to 2005, and Gyrocloud start at 2012 April. Now, Gyrocloud user institution is 651. In 2012, there will be over 800 institution repository in Japan, and 80% of institutions are using Gyrocloud. Gyrocloud is a leading institution repository service in Japan. Next, we introduce the usage of Gyrocloud based on some data. This graph plots the use of Gyrocloud in terms of number of items and disk usage per institutional repository. Gyrocloud contains a repository from all sites, but 30% repository in Gyrocloud has only 10,000 items and under 20 gigabyte. Large repository make up only a few percent of ancient repository hosted to Gyrocloud. Next, I will show the status of usage statistics logs manager Gyrocloud users. This graph plot usage statistics log size and start date of repository operation. The institution can delete, can manage repository usage repository statistics, but many institutions cannot delete, did not delete the usage statistics logs, and it keep in on Gyrocloud. From this log size, we can see the access to Gyrocloud is actually concentrated a few institutions. This repository is incentive access in the repository. They have many access in Gyrocloud. And this graph is a last graph showing the usage of Gyrocloud. As number of organizations using Gyrocloud increase, we have recorded up to 54 terabyte GET request and 70 gigabyte post request per month. And the Gyrocloud mainly for currently Gyrocloud repository user can manage the paper, only paper, not the research data. So in the future, this graph is changed, will be changed. And this is current usage, current Gyrocloud new functionality. This slide show a typical change from the current Gyrocloud of the current of the cloud to new cloud. The new Gyrocloud is based on Invenio version 3, which has a systemically scalable architecture to support research data and extend the original functionality of Gyrocloud. The metadata schema current Gyrocloud use Junitsu, but the new Gyrocloud use a JP core schema. This schema is based on the data site schema for supporting research data. And next new feature, new Gyrocloud can manage hierarchical metadata schema. Many research data metadata schema has hierarchical metadata. New Gyrocloud support hierarchical metadata. And new Gyrocloud support submission workflow preview functionality, and a new Gyrocloud is customizable functionality and for supporting open science improvement system scalability and metadata flexibility. And we also are developing some other functionality to publish research data in instant repository. One function is support restricted access. Many research data is not open. This graph is made made from data, read-through data, org data. Research data, usual research data control restricted control restrict access. So research data restrict access are required for supporting research data publication. So in Gyrocloud provide the customized functionality of submission workflow and download workflow. Because some many research data required some restricted access. So Gyrocloud will provide customizable download workflow functionality. And next function for supporting research data publication. Research data publication requires rich metadata for discovery and reuse. So for supporting research data, Gyrocloud provides flexibility of metadata schema editor. This metadata schema can edit metadata set with a hierarchical metadata schema, and also can mapping OIPMH metadata schema. And Gyrocloud also provides the ability of customize the search function for these uniquely enhanced research rich metadata schema. For supporting rich metadata discovery, Gyrocloud provide search functionality like a facet search. Facet search can search rich metadata schema without the knowledge of rich metadata schema. So Gyrocloud provides a customizability of facet search functionality.
3 minutes left.
Oh, sorry. And also the new Gyrocloud also includes changing the infrastructure environment. Previously, Gyrocloud used the 35 server with web server and using virtual hosting functionality for providing 600 repository. The new Gyrocloud is using Kubernetes environment. In a new Gyrocloud provide a database cluster and Elasticsearch cluster, RabbitMQ cluster, and the all repositories share these database Elasticsearch and middleware. And also support the S3 compatible state storage. And so the repository can easy to expand the storage capacity. And code management for infrastructure is effective use of computing resources in Kubernetes. In this slide, show our data migration plan. We convert new current Gyrocloud data to new Gyrocloud data. And this is our migration schedule. We develop a data migration tool with JP Core support team, and several tests were conducted to develop data migration tool. We will start the migration group A and end of this month. And next slide shows the performance tuning of Gyrocloud environment. Currently, the tuning middleware performance by loaded test using JMeter. This experience and knowledge of performance tuning will be critical information of implements sustainable service delivery. The following advantage of disadvantage Kubernetes use. The advantage is that it can manage server environment as code. And next advantage is what is the difference between staging image and the production environment. The disadvantage is that repository can easily to develop, but easy to destroy everything. So operation workflow is very and Kubernetes is difficult to run and not easy to operate. So there is a running cost. Has a need a running cost.
1 minute left.
Sorry, and this is my last slide. Gyrocloud is reborn as an ancient repository service that's supporting open science for supporting research data. Gyrocloud released some feature and renew the infrastructure environment. Data migration will make the exist 600 institutes ready for research data publication. But the migration of usage statics data is complicated and difficult. So we think usage statics data management function maybe the key to is the migration in the future. In the feature plan, we refine the feature for research data by collaborating with user feedback and research data provider. And we will work on automation test and development automation. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much for your presentation. It was very, very impressive, and you have built a very, very big service. And one question which you didn't really cover is, you mentioned that there are lots of organizations using your service, but do they pay for it, or is it somehow centrally paid by the government?
Sorry?
Do the organizations using your service pay for
Yes.
it somehow, or is it paid centrally by the Japanese government?
Japanese government?
What is a business model? Do you have a fee for an institution to participate in your service?
So thank you for question. Currently, Gyrocloud require the service fee. And the Gyrocloud user need to join a JP Core community. So they pay some service fee, and the Gyrocloud is operated by the collecting this service fee. So this is a service model in Gyrocloud.
Thank you very much for your presentation and for the reply to the question as well. We have time pressure, so I think we must move forward and to the next presentation. If you can stop your share so that we can go to the next presentation. So the next speaker will be Frederic Plans, the Kunziger Plans, who will be talking about HAL, which is the French National Open Archive, and the future plans for it. So please go on.
Okay, I will share my screen. I'm sorry. Oh. Yeah, okay. Is it okay for you?
We can see your desktop, but not the presentation.
Sorry?
We see your desktop, but not the presentation.
It's not a presentation. Okay, sorry.
Maybe stop sharing and start again.
Yeah, sorry. Oh, yes, I think it's there. Okay, is it okay now?
Yes.
Okay. So I'm Benedict Kunziger. I'm part of the Ccsd team, the unit that produces HAL, the French National Open Repository for Publications. And it's a real pleasure to present here its new sustainable funding model and its new shared governance. First, I will give an overview of Ccsd and HAL. Then I will explain the French national context and the need that become essential to build a sustainable financial model for HAL and a new governance model. Then I will explain how we have been building it. So HAL was created in 2001, and it's a French National Open Repository. It's a research infrastructure of French Ministry of Higher Education, Research and Innovation. HAL is managed by the Center for Direct Scientific Communication, a common service unit joining CNRS, INRIA, and INRAE, that are national research organizations. The Ccsd is the support of an integrated research infrastructure dedicated to open science. Its mission is to provide tools and services to researchers and higher education and research institutions to make their scientific output widely available, discoverable, usable, and long-term accessible. In that way, Ccsd develops and manages 3 complementary and interconnected platforms. At the heart of the system, we find the Common National Repository HAL with more than 160 distributed portals, common services, and technical resources. Epsciences is an overlay journals platform connected with HAL. It offers an alternative to the system of scientific publication with a diamond model. Epsciences platform supports submission of manuscript via deposit in an open archive, peer review management, and publications in EpiJournals. And ScienceConf is a platform for organizing scientific conferences. It provides tools to review submissions and export conference papers to HAL. HAL is a multidisciplinary repository and hosts several types of documents, such as articles, preprints, communications, theses, so on. And at the end of 2020, HAL enables the diffusion of more than 860,000 documents. The number of submitted documents has increased regularly from 2001 and reached an increase of more than 166,000 files in 2020. 60 million of files were downloaded, and HAL had 74,000 active user accounts in 2020. Rich and qualitative metadata describe the documents in HAL. Some of them are used to build institutional repositories based on researchers' affiliations. Nowadays, HAL provides a network of 139 French institutional repositories, 64 for universities, 40 for higher education schools, and 35 for research institutions, with customizing websites. All documents deposited in HAL or in one of these repositories benefit to all repositories. Documents and metadata are shared by all the stakeholders and benefit of all the services that are provided by HAL, like long-term preservation, stability of identifiers, interconnections with other international repositories, and dissemination with OAI PMH harvesting, OpenAIRE, for example, Harvest HAL, open APIs, standard protocols and formats, and so on. So HAL is a central repository for infrastructure with a single environment and a single database, but is multifaceted with distributed portals. The national context in France is a great opportunity for HAL that becomes a pillar for open science in France. First, the French law for a digital republic enabled researchers to deposit their publications in open repositories with possible embargoes. In 2018, France has adopted an ambitious open science policy with the National Plan for Open Science. The first commitment of this plan aims to generalize open access to publications. It has confirmed the main role of HAL as part of the new interinstitutional agreements to strengthen its national missions. Then a French steering committee for open science ensures the implementation of this policy, supporting open publications and research data. In addition, one of the measures taken for the first topic of the National Plan for Open Science was the creation of an open science fund, which aim is to support open science initiatives by implementing calls for projects. The national policy and the stated policies of research organizations for supporting open science, CNRS, for example, with its open science roadmap, or research funders, French Funding Agency for Research, for example. All these incentive policies led these past 3 years to a huge growth of publications deposited in HAL. But if these strong policies have confirmed the key role of HAL, they highlighted that HAL has to meet the needs of the French research communities. The need of having a strong infrastructure with sufficient and recurrent financial resources to respond to the growing demands of researchers and institutional users has become essential. Nowadays, the current budget is covered by the French Ministry's contribution of 300,000 euros and the CNRS contribution of 136,000 euros. Moreover, CNRS provides a large in-kind contribution in terms of human resources, legal and finance support, and support for the executive director position. The sustainability of the increase of the resources needed for a new ambition has been covered in 2019 by an exceptional CNRS contribution of 385,000 euros, and in 2020 by a grant from the National Fund for Open Science of 500,000 euros. Until now, an institutional portal had only to pay 1,200 euros once when the portal was created, which is a very low cost that will not reflect the reality of production costs. In 2020, in order to better take into account the user needs and to provide ongoing funding for HAL, the supervising bodies of Ccsd and the Committee for Open Science discussed with the relevant stakeholders in setting up a new fee schedule for institutional portals with these principles. CCSD financial and human resources are not in line with expectations and ambitions for HAL. HAL remains an open archive, free to use, free to read, and free to submit for researchers, laboratories, citizens in France and in other countries. We have to reach a sustainable funding model by expanding the funding base. For the fee schedule, a target annual income of 700,000 euros, in addition to the support of the ministry and the supervising bodies. The amount that institutions will have to pay will take over the exceptional financial contributions given this last year by CNRS and the National Fund for Open Science, and a contribution principle to a collaborative and shared infrastructure, but not to service user fees. The new business model will be based on the number of researchers of an institution to take into account the diversity of situations in research organizations, universities, and higher education schools. Contributions level range from 2,000 euros to 18,000 euros per year with 5 submission ranks. This new fee schedule has to be combined with a renewal of the governance for stakeholders to be more included with this guideline. Efficiency, the priorities are clearly and collegially defined, taking into account human and financial resources necessary for the implementation of the projects, and by the establishment of evaluation and audit procedures. Transparency, decisions, policy implementation, and results are made public. Representation, reasonable efforts are made to take into account and conciliate various legitimate interests and to reach a broad consensus, as well as on the means to achieve this. And users are involved in a clearly defined way in governance. And long-term sustainability and direction, the future of the programs and services offered by CCSD are seen in the long term from a broad perspective. The objective of this new governance is to better involve users in the development of the platforms and to strengthen the Scientific Council by giving it an international dimension. It will be organized in 4 bodies: the International Scientific Council. That role is to ensure a scientific and technological watch and to advise on national or international partnerships. The Partners Assembly gathers the representative of the contributing establishments having a HAL portal. The Assembly points the needs of institutions managing a HAL portal and providing an annual financial contribution. The Assembly appoints some representative to the Orientation Committee. This committee is composed of the same members as the steering committee, plus the president of the International Scientific Council and 6 representatives of the partners platforms. Its role is to propose orientations to the steering committee on the basis of the needs identified by the users in the Partners Assembly and the recommendations of the International Scientific Council. And the steering committee gathers the 3 supervising bodies of CCSD, the Ministry of Higher Education, Research and Innovation, the Conference of University Presidents, and the director of the CCSD. It decides on budgetary aspects, human resources, arbitrates among the proposals of the Orientation Committee, and will respond to those given by the National Steering Committee for Open Science. Even if this new step for CCSD is the result of wide consultations between the partners to agree on a decisive consensus, it needs time to communicate, explain, and to address issues and raise the last barrier with operational frameworks in institutions. Not only the head of institutions, but the teams that are in charge of services for researchers and open science and are in charge of the HAL portal of their institution have to be involved in the process. The new governance organization will be implemented in 2021. Now, Ccsd has already hired a community leader to organize works with institutions and researchers communities. The first partners assembly will take place on the 1st of July, followed by the appointment of the International Scientific Council in September. Stakeholders will pay their first annual contribution in 2022. During 2021, Ccsd will consult them to agree on the amounts they will have to pay.
1 minute.
Yeah. In conclusion, this new funding model could be built because of a strong political support and strong commitments of stakeholders, research organizations, or universities in consolidating their strategies for open science. Maybe it's a wide part of the key to the success. Ccsd financial sustainability is based on diverse, reliable, and community-based funding sources. This had to be combined with a more shared governance for institutions that will pay financial contributions to be more included, and so that institutional actors see HAL as a common tool which meets their needs and for which they are involved in decision-making. These new elements will allow the technical consolidation of HAL, the development of new services to users and institutions, and will promote a better insertion of Ccsd in the ecosystem of European open science infrastructures. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I found this very, very interesting as someone who is trying to run similar services in another country. But we have a question from Jan Mahe, and it's, is HAL an open source platform?
Is an open source platform? Not yet. It's not an open source platform because when it was developed in the 2001, it wasn't an open source platform, but we try to. Maybe we have a funding program, a funding grant to help to do that in the next years.
So it's something that is being discussed. Yeah, but I think I will have to thank you for your very interesting presentation, and we must move forward to our last presentation in this session. And if you can stop sharing your presentation, thank you very much. And our final presentation before the break will be by Yasmin Al-Sedi, Dalal Grants, and Mohamed Baessa from KAUST. And it will be about the development of open services at their institution to enhance institutional research tracking workflows. And this will be a recorded presentation, but the presenters will be available to answer your questions after the presentation. So please go forward. You can start the presentation.
Yeah, sorry, I'm getting it.
Hello.
Just a second.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for watching this recorded presentation. Today, me, Mohamed Baissa, and my colleagues, Darrell Grins and Yasmin Al-Saidi, will be talking about institutional research and tracking workflow, a locally developed applications in KAUST, and it's now available for you in public GitHubs. Before we start talking about the tracking, I would like to give you a little background about KAUST. KAUST is a research-based university established in 2009. It's organized around academic divisions and research labs and core labs and other departments to support that. And that's important structure to keep in mind to understand the importance of reporting and what we do. In CAUS, we try to focus the research in four areas: water, environment, energy, and food. And at the beginning of 2013, the university established an open access committee to develop an open access policy and procedure. The committee consists of faculty, library, policy office, legal office, and we worked together for almost 18 months to develop the policy and procedures. The most important, if you look at this policy, is that library was tasked to develop and monitor to a plan to comply with this policy and existing copyright obligation in a manner as convenient for faculty as possible. And that, I think, is a key behind this development and others as well, is to make it as possible as convenient for faculty and other researchers. In 2016, we presented at Open Repository Conference our early efforts toward the comprehensive and up-to-date institutional repository. We tried to share at that time our early effort to promote people's self-depositing, a manual publication tracking and contacting authors. And this was a slide also from that presentation. The response rate was very low. And then we start developing more automated and more proactive tracking process to maximize what we do in behalf of the researchers, to bridge the gap between the publication or publishing times and the contacting time to the authors, and most importantly, to commit establishing a comprehensive institutional repository. You could see that over the last 6 years, we have been growing in terms of compliance. And last year, we were able to achieve around 85% of compliance on faculty authored publications. How this tool is work and what does it do exactly, I'll leave it to my colleagues, Daryl and Yasmin, to take you through.
So the IRTS, the Institutional Research Tracking Service, is one of several local services that we run. They all have the same basic setup. They get updated information from DSpace through OAI, and they update DSpace through the REST API. And on the other side, they're interacting with all of these external services. We've released the code open source on GitHub, so we would really appreciate if you have a chance to look at it and give us feedback. The available sources for publication metadata are listed here, and also the method we use for querying them. Once you have the nightly queries running to these different services, then you'll have items to process in this dashboard. And so this is where the library staff are coming in and actually checking the new items. The basic item review process starts with confirming the relationship to KAUST, either through affiliation or funding. We also have added data and code availability checking steps. One of the time-consuming steps is checking the license and publisher policy. Once we find there's an eligible file, so something with a Creative Commons license or released directly from the publisher as an accepted manuscript, or with a journal policy that allows it to be reused, we will make the deposit with the appropriate embargo. Otherwise, we send requests to the KAUST authors, and if we get a file back from them, we deposit that as well. Since we started this process, our process has improved, and also the awareness among the researchers has improved. So we have a pretty steady response rate to our requests, though in many cases we don't need to request a manuscript because we're able to get it in other ways. And that process of identifying when we need to make a request or when we can get a file from somewhere else is what my colleague Yasmin will introduce, how we've improved that.
We have integrated 3 different APIs in the right step. This is the last step in the processing form. The first API we integrated is the Shopper Romeo. We use Shopper Romeo to retrieve the publisher policy, and based on that, the IRTS code will change the version of the article. And mainly we use the Shopper Romeo API version 2, which is we can retrieve the embargo length in months. And this has helped us to calculate the embargo date based on the publication date as a starting date. The second integration, we integrate the Crossref API. And from Crossref API, we retrieve the common Creative Commons license for the open access articles, if any. And based on that, also IRTS will automatically change the version of the article to the published version PDF to match the license. The last update is the last integration, is the Unpaywall integration, and we integrated it in 2 different ways. The first one we included in the right step, and from Unpaywall we retrieve the arXiv ID for the articles, and also we retrieve the possible freely available files for this article. The second way to integrate, we have integrated the Unpaywall API is by a standalone processing form. And this is mainly for the old item review. So you can revisit the old item and check if there is any Unpaywall result. Since we integrated the Unpaywall, we have saved more than 750 freely available version through Unpaywall API, and this has helped us to avoid duplications. Since the Unpaywall did a pretty good job with matching the articles with the preprint, even if when the title is changed. So the most case scenario will happen when you have the preprint in your repository, and you want to update its metadata with the new article data. So using Unpaywall, you can retrieve the arXiv ID for the article, and IRTS will do the job by matching the arXiv for the preprint and the article, and allows you to update the metadata, the existing metadata, and the DSpace in the last step of the processing form. So this is about the integration. I will return back to Darer to talk about tracking acknowledgement.
Yes, thank you, Yasmin. I just wanted to add a bit about the other added value work that we see ourselves doing through this process. So we're gathering some information that we wouldn't be able to retrieve from external sources. Some is information about acknowledgements to KAUST. So we track not just the funding acknowledgements and specific grant numbers, but also acknowledgements of organizational units and people. And we've started to use this to offer people the option of getting notifications when their lab or a unit is acknowledged as supporting a publication, which is something they are interested to know. We also track data and code availability statements, and we use that information to find out about things that have been released publicly that are related to the KAUST affiliated articles. So in the process, you would have a statement, and then you would pull out the references to specific data sets or software in other places. And later we check what exactly the relationship is. And if it's something that is so closely related, so it's supplemental to the article normally, then we will create a new record in the repository for that data set or code. It will just be a metadata only record, but it will show where in different resources KAUST authors are releasing their data sets and software, and then also show what articles those items are related to. So all through these processes, we're gathering lots of information. We're still just learning how to make this useful to the university and the library to really understand this information. And my colleague Mohammed will talk a little bit more about the potential for the use of this information.
Thank you, Daryl. So as Daryl mentioned, we collect a lot of information through this process, and we developed a number of dashboards that give us a good indication of how different services are working. And one of the dashboards was trying to analyze the publishers and authors' preferences. So we are able to track like what are the publishers most of our faculties or authors are publishing with, what are the different licenses for those published works. And we then try to support the decision making. So library was joining the club of supporting the gold open access path through different ways, read and publish agreements, discounted models, and subscribe to open models. And I think we had a good success with that. So we have number of signed agreements with a number of publishers, but there are a lot of challenges. I have added a link for a presentation for my colleagues who talks about that in the recent ER&L conferences. Summarizing the challenges they are facing is how they are managing different open access agreements, different workflows, author eligibility. Some publishers are allowing only corresponding co-authors to be get the benefits of these kind of agreements, and finally how they can track and report on the implementation of different agreements, and then that information to be used to market and promote the services among the researchers. So these all are putting future developments for the IRTS, and hopefully we'll meet you again in the future Open Repository Conference to talk about that works. Thank you and welcome any questions.
Thank you very much. And this seems to be a very impressive and comprehensive systems built on an institutional level. I'm not sure if you have any questions actually, but there are some comments in the chat. And I see also that we are running out of time, but I wonder if you would have to like to comment, for example, the comment from Rutger de Jong, who wonders whether the rights retention strategy would it make it easier, as license can be chosen and the author accepted manuscript does not need an embargo.
Yeah, I tried to put a comment to that in the chat as well. So our policy is based on the rights retention concept, but it also says that we will comply with existing agreements that authors make with publishers. So we still apply author embargoes on the author accepted manuscript.
Yep, thank you very much for the presentation, and also thanks to all of the other presenters. We are running out of time, and there will be another session starting in this Zoom room very soon. But thanks to all of our excellent presenters, and also thanks for all of your questions during this session.
So we have 5 minutes until the next session. So if everyone wants to take a tea, coffee, water break. We'll be back in 5 minutes. For our presenters in the next session, I don't know if you want to test your audio, just to make sure.
Yes, I'm happy to.
Hi. Great, both coming in crystal clear.
It's good.
Okay, hello. Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Great.
Just to double check, so I have Leah, you doing the presentation, but is Peter just here for questions?
Yes, exactly.
Yes.
Yeah, just like up for questions.
Great.
Should I start sharing my screen or?
I'll just keep it on the presentation screen just for people arriving.
Okay, cool.
But I'll stop it soon. As soon as I stop screen sharing, feel free to start screen sharing.
Okay.
Okay, it is 7 p.m. my time. Welcome to presentation session 4. We have a great set of 3 presentations lined up for you in the next hour. My name is Dimity Flanagan. I'm coming to you from the University of Melbourne. And for that reason, I would like to begin with an acknowledgement of country. So I would like to acknowledge the many unceded lands in which we are meeting on today. I myself am on the lands of the Wurundjeri people, and I would like to acknowledge and pay my respects to elders past, present, and emerging. So before we start today, I'd just like to basically a few housekeeping things. If you were not here for the previous hour, Open Repositories does have a code of conduct. It is linked there on the screen. I will also put it in the chat. If you do need to report any code violations, the instructions are on that link. We also have a shared Google Doc, which you'll find in the schedule system. And if any questions cannot be answered in the time today, we will put the responses to those questions in that shared Google Doc. Just a reminder that this session is being recorded and live streamed to YouTube. The recordings will be made available on Zenodo at a point later in time. So first up, our first presentation, I will just stop screen sharing. First up is Leah Gerhards from the Leibniz Institute for Psychology with her wonderful presentation, which I will, addressing the need for regulating access in the disciplinary repository Psych archives. And I believe her co-authors will also be available afterwards for questions. Leah, over to you.
Yes, thanks Dimity for the introductory words. Can everyone see my screen now?
Yes.
Okay, great. So yeah, welcome everyone to this session and to my presentation. My name is Leah Gerhards. I work for the Leibniz Institute for Psychology. We're based in Trier, Germany. I will give you a brief overview of my talk today. First, I will shortly introduce our repository Psych archives, then jump to the data sharing situation in psychology. And then I will get to the sharing level concept that I would like to present to you today. So first the theory part and then the implementation part, how we do this in DSpace 6. And I will then summarize everything that I've talked about at the end. Okay, so Psych archives in a nutshell. Psych archives is a disciplinary repository for psychological science and neighboring disciplines. It's based on the open source repository software DSpace 6 and is provided, as I said, as a non-commercial public service by the Leibniz Institute for Psychology. And we are a scientific research support organization for psychology in German-speaking countries. In Psych archives, a variety of digital research objects, which we call DROs for short. So a variety of these DROs are made accessible for the long term. This includes articles, preprints, research data, code, supplements, pre-registrations, tests, and multimedia objects. DROs in Psych archives are assigned a DOI to make them easily and uniquely citable, and they are also indexed in public search engines such as Google Scholar and PubPsych, for example. By providing a digital space integrating all relevant research-related content, Psych archives aims to be a one-stop research platform for academics, students, the psychological professional practice, and basically anyone interested in psychological topics. So what are the requirements that psychological researchers are expected to meet when archiving or sharing their research data? Well, today more and more funding institutions and professional journals are telling researchers, if you want us to fund your research project or if you want us to publish your article, we would like you to please make your research data accessible according to the FAIR principles. So what they ask researchers to do is to make their data findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable. And I'm guessing most of you are familiar with this FAIR concept. At the same time, recommendations on data sharing, such as the ones by the German Psychological Society, postulate that a restriction of access to research data is sometimes necessary. So for German psychology researchers, the determining legal background involves relevant data protection laws, such as the General Data Protection Regulation. When collecting research data in the frame of studies or experiments, researchers are responsible for ensuring that personal data is anonymized and pseudonymized before data sets are made available in a repository. Also, it's crucial not only from a legal point of view, but also from the perspective of research ethics, that researchers obtain the informed consent of study participants for potential secondary use of the data. So this is just to give a very broad overview of potential issues that might complicate the data sharing process in psychology. And as you can perhaps glean, even from this very short introduction, this is a very complex situation in which researchers have to ponder different things like best practice standards, data protection laws, aspects of research ethics, and also their own legitimate scientific interests when they decide if, how, and when they want to share their research data. So in order to do justice to all these requirements, researchers need a trustworthy repository that offers different solutions for data sharing. And this is where PsycArchive comes in. So our solution to address this complex situation is the PsycArchive's sharing level concept. That means that our repository offers different sharing levels, determining access to and usage rights of PsycArchive's content. So these are the two aspects that the concept determines: the access to and the usage rights of the content. These sharing levels range from open and immediate access to more restrictive access categories. And each sharing level is equipped with specific licensing options. The concept is in line with the recommendations on data management and data sharing in psychological science by the German Psychological Society that I already referenced earlier. So how does this look? We have sharing levels 0 and 0 plus, and also sharing level 1. Sharing levels 0 and 0 plus allow open and immediate access to content. These two sharing levels are applicable in all cases in which there are no plausible reasons for restricting access from the perspective of the scientific community. So if you don't include any data from human subjects research, or if you don't have any reasons from the standpoint of research ethics, then this is the sharing level for your research data, or at least it should be. Contributors choose an open content license from our license portfolio, and we work with Creative Commons licenses there. As for the difference between 0 and 0 plus, it's simply that if contributors wish to learn how others use their content, they may provide it through sharing level 0 plus. Because when someone retrieves 0 plus content, they are asked to disclose information about their intended use of the content. And this is an optional step. So if you don't want to give any indication of how you want to use the content, you can basically skip this step and then you'll get the content anyway. But in any case, if someone downloads 0 plus content, contributors get an email saying, hey, someone downloaded your content and they want to use it for X, in the case of someone giving the intended use. Sharing level 1 refers to content that is provided for scientific use only. So this sharing level is based on a standardized license agreement, which we offer This license agreement was formulated with the help of a lawyer, Dr. Till Kreuzer, who specializes in copyright issues in the digital realm. So we present the standardized license agreement for contributors to use. And in this license agreement, the purposes of scientific use are basically defined. Content made available in this sharing level 1 can be accessed by users after logging into their Archives profile. So they have to make an account there. They have to provide information about the intended use of the requested content. And this time it's not an optional step. They really have to do it. And at last, they have, of course, to accept the defined license conditions, so the license agreement. Contributors can then keep track of the number of accepted license agreements for their content through their own Archives profile. A crucial part of the sharing level concept is also that access and usage rights may vary within one DRO. So Archives allows for a flexible and granular allocation of sharing levels on the level of individual files. This is a frequent use case when scientists are archiving research data. So the codebook and accompanying documentation probably belongs in sharing level 0, so can be made available for immediate download, while the data files may potentially only be provided within sharing level 1, for example. And yeah, you can do that in Archives. And this is what this would look like in the repository then. You can see an example DRO here. So at the top, you can see the metadata of the DRO, so the object, and the files at the bottom. And the research data are marked as scientific, as available for scientific use here, and the codebook as available for public use. Now, a little caveat, both the implementation of sharing levels higher than 0 and the allocation of sharing levels on a file level are currently underway. So this is coming very soon. When we handed in this presentation, we thought we would have had implemented everything already, but we didn't manage to do that. But we are basically right in the middle of it, the implementation. So how do we implement this in DSpace 6? To explain this, I need to mention that the repository is complemented by a tool for the submission of content, which we call PASA, the Archives Submission Assistant, and one for the delivery of content. So the Archives Delivery Assistant, short PADA. As for the submission of content, the PASA side, Archives does not employ the standard submission workflow of DSpace, but instead we use this custom tool because our requirements for the submission process would have required extensive adjustments to the DSpace workflow. And the decision to outsource this work step to a separate tool was made, among other things, due to the easier upgrade capability of the underlying repository software. Yes, contributors who want to use the PASA may either use their ORCID ID for authenticating, or they may create a license psychology user account. The PASA then gives contributors full control over the sharing levels and licenses of their items and bitstreams. And this is now DSpace lingo. If you're familiar with it, then you know what I'm talking about, items and bitstreams. The PASA application uses 2 minutes?
Yeah.
Okay, noted. The PASA application uses the REST API of DSpace 6 for creating and updating the policies and metadata of items and bitstreams, also the upload of bitstreams. From a technical point of view, the sharing levels in Archives are implemented as DSpace groups. As for the other side, the PADA DSpace provides only a simple process for delivering embargoed or restricted content to the user with the help of the request a copy function. And that didn't suit us very well. We developed the PADA tool to make the process more user-friendly and better aligned with our requirements. So the PADA controls access to the bit streams and delivers them to users, depending on the sharing level, of course. Getting a bitstream with sharing level 1 requires the user to authenticate with their ORCID ID or Leibniz Psychology account again. Okay. Just a short summarizing statement. Providing a differentiated sharing level concept, regulating access to and usage rights of repository content, PsycArchives presents a flexible and granular solution for archiving and making accessible psychological research output in line with best practice standards, recommendations by scientific societies, as well as ethical and data protection requirements. Thank you for listening, and questions or comments are welcome if you have any.
Thank you, Leah. That was a really interesting presentation. I think something has just come into the Q&A. We have a question from Samuel. Is the sensitive level 1 content for PsycArchives stored on premises or in the cloud?
Shall I answer this question, Leah?
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah. Well, at the moment, it's well, it's on premises. It's on our server, and up to now, we have our own infrastructure, and we do not use a cloud provider like Amazon or something like this. It's a bit critical in Germany and in Europe because of the GPDR. And so we would also have to. We can also store anonymized data, and if we use a cloud provider outside of Europe, we would have to encrypt the data. I hope this answers the question.
There is a follow-up question from Samuel. Is the Bespoke license for the restricted data available publicly? I would really like to have a look at the license.
Yeah, since we haven't implemented the sharing level 1 yet, the license hasn't been made available publicly, but we're certainly planning to do that. So it will be linked from our information pages, definitely.
Great. So watch this space.
Yeah.
Yeah, and please contact us if you have further questions.
Yeah, you could also do that.
And there is another question from Jussi. I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly. Is there more detailed documentation available about the PSA, the ASA, and the PADA?
Well, not yet. We have our code in GitHub repositories. It's based on PHP Symfony. But if you need further information, please don't hesitate to contact me directly. I guess we will publish the code in the near future, but honestly, we thought it's such a proprietary solution that it's not much of further interest. But please contact me if you like to have further information.
Wonderful. Okay, there is one more question, but I will ask that you put the answer in the Q&A box, because we will have to move on to the next presentation. That keep coming in, so you'll be kept busy. But thank you very much for that presentation. It was wonderful. So if I can ask you to stop sharing your screen. Wonderful. And I will pass the screen sharing over to Connie. So Connie is next up. Connie Claire is from 4TU Research Data in the Netherlands, and she will be presenting 4TU Research Data Building the Community. So I will pass over to you, Connie.
Thank you very much. I'll just share my screen and hopefully you can see the slides. Can everybody see those slides now?
Yes, perfectly.
Perfect, thank you. So it's great to be here. Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, wherever in the world you're dialing in from. My name's Connie Claire, and I'm the Community Manager for 4TU Research Data, which is a data repository. And as the introduction said, I'll be giving you an overview about how we plan to build the community around the technical infrastructure. So a few questions that I would like to answer during this presentation. First of all, what is 4TU Research Data? Why do we need community? Who are our community members at the moment? What is our goal? And also, what do we do together as a community to achieve our goal? So first of all, an introduction to 4TU Research Data. It's an international data repository for science, engineering, and design disciplines. And it's available to researchers all around the world. So any researcher in any institution can publish their data or code in the 4TU Research Data repository. And the aim is to support researchers in the curation, sharing, access, and long-term preservation of research data. And we're currently in the process of renewing our core trust seal of approval. So once again, we'll be a certified digital repository. And the repository was founded over a decade ago now, back in 2010, as part of the 4TU Federation. So 4TU stands for 4 technical universities, and 3 of those technical universities in the Netherlands support the data repository. So that includes Delft Technology, Delft University of Technology, Eindhoven University of Technology, and also the University of Twente. And it's been great to see that over the past 10 years or so, we've had more than 8,400 technical science data sets deposited within the repository. And this portal just gives you a bit of a snapshot and an overview of the different disciplines that we support at 4TU Research Data. And the majority, so over 3,000 data sets, actually come from Earth, atmospheric, and environmental sciences. So when we think about building a community, what we're hoping to do is develop tailored discipline-specific solutions for fair data. So to help researchers make their data findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable. And whilst we have the technical infrastructure and the repository has certain features that can help, what we're talking about with community is the human infrastructure, so the people that can support researchers. So why do we need community? Because we realize that good repositories and good technical infrastructure on its own isn't enough to make data fair. So we really need to work with and invest in people and supporters that can meet researchers where they're at. We also appreciate that research communities and disciplinary problems cross institutional borders. And as we're a consortium of 3 Dutch technical universities, we think that we should come together and collaborate in helping to solve these problems. So what do we mean when we talk about community? Because community is a bit of a buzzword, it's used in many different contexts, and it's often a bit overextended. So this is a definition I've adapted from an organization called the Ccsd. So community is when people with a shared purpose come together to achieve goals and tasks that they wouldn't otherwise be able to do on their own. It's also a space where information flows in multiple directions, so it's not just coming from the same place every time. And this kind of dynamic conversation provides opportunities for learning and hopefully provides members with a place to foster meaningful connections and develop this sense of belonging and inclusivity. So members feel empowered, encouraged, and welcome to contribute. So that brings me on to explaining a bit about our community. So who are the community members? This is one of my favorite slides. It shows some of the members that have joined the 4TU Research Data community and helped its growth during the inception phase. So we now have more than 70 members that have joined our online community platform. You can see the link here. And we also have a Slack workspace. And the members are primarily, but not exclusively, from the partner institutions. So anybody interested in creating and reusing FAIR data can join the community. So we have researchers from the technical sciences, and we also have data supporters. So we have data stewards, data managers, research software engineers, educators, librarians, IT specialists, and also the technical staff that maintain and manage the repository. So what is the goal of this community? The community aims to provide a space for these members, researchers, and data supporters to connect with one another and exchange knowledge about the best practices for creating and reusing FAIR data using the 4TU Research Data Repository. So for the rest of the presentation, I'd just like to share some initiatives to show you what we do together and how in order to achieve this goal. So we're really interested in engagement and education. So we've developed working groups and focus groups, and we also provide opportunities for training and workshops, and also demonstrations of how to upload your data and publish data using the repository. We're also very passionate about reward and recognition. So on the community platform, we share researcher and research data support stories. And I'll also share 2 new initiatives for how we celebrate data. And towards the end of the presentation, I'll just go over a couple of FAIR data incentives. So we have a FAIR data fund, and we're also launching a fellowship program towards the end of the year. So just to begin, I'll give you an overview of the community working groups. So these are working groups that are for the data stewards who are full-time embedded staff members within those 4TU partner institutions. So the working groups were established in January 2021, so they're now around 6 months old, and each working group comprises 15 to 18 data stewards. We meet every month for 1 hour to work on a particular topic, and then we also work on tasks and activities in between those sessions as required. And the idea of the working groups is to give the floor to the data stewards to share their personal experiences, ask one another questions. And because we have data stewards at different levels of their career, it's really important that they get to learn from one another and gain confidence in their support roles. And as the name implies, it's a working group. So the idea is that they contribute ideas and ultimately co-create resources that can be a benefit to the community. So we have 3 active working groups, and I'm just going to go into a bit more detail on what they involve. So we have the Fair and Reproducible Code Working Group. So in this group, the data stewards learn about the tools and environments that can be used to help researchers write, document, and test software code. We also talk about version control systems such as GitHub, how to collaborate on code and develop pipelines for different programming languages. And then we also talk about the appropriate licenses to share software and how to publish on 4TU research data. And one deliverable that we're working on at the moment as a group is a train the trainer workshop on how to write fair and reproducible code. This will take place at the end of June. It is for the data stewards. So we have 5 data stewards who are confident to be instructors during the sessions. And then we'll have 12 data stewards who will participate as learners. But hopefully, if this goes well, it will empower the data stewards to be able to deliver this workshop for researchers. We also have a privacy and GDPR working group. So in this session, the data stewards talk about how to advise researchers on the appropriate management of personal or commercially sensitive data. So we talk about informed consent and any legal, privacy, or ethics considerations that researchers might need to be aware of. And one deliverable that we're working on at the moment is a set of published guidelines about data agreements across the different institutions. So this could be data processing agreements, data transfer agreements, non-disclosure agreements, and hopefully we'll be able to make these guidelines available to the community and the public. And a final working group is engagement and education. So this is a general working group where the data stewards can share experiences about their role and develop workflows to support researchers. So 2 deliverables we have at the moment. We have an inventory of the generic and disciplinary training that the data stewards provide within their institutions, so we can share and swap ideas. And we're also collecting use cases from different projects so that we can get an overview of discipline-specific practices in different departments, and also identify some of the common research data management challenges and solutions that the data stewards face. So I also mentioned that training and workshops is an important part of our community programming. So we have 2 data trainers that are affiliated with the community. We have Paula and we have Irini, and they deliver various different research data management courses. But we have a collaboration with the Carpentries since 2018, so we can help researchers with their software and data management. These are 4 half-day workshops, and we run those in collaboration with the partner institutions, as well as Leiden University in the Netherlands. And we also showcase other opportunities for training that researchers or data supporters can get involved in. So one example is this massive open online course on open science. We also have the Research Data Netherlands Essentials for Data Support course that we promote, and any other success stories and lessons learned from other disciplinary courses. So the example you can see here is a Python workshop for geospatial researchers, and this was organised and delivered by Ashley and Jose from the TU Delft Digital Competency Centre. So now to move on to reward and recognition. One thing that we like to do is to showcase the good practices of researchers who are achieving fair data and open science. So here you can see a data set that's on tropical cyclone risk research. And this was published by a PhD student at Amsterdam, Vrije University in Amsterdam, Nadia Bloemendaal. And Nadia won the Dutch Data Prize for this data set that underlies a peer-reviewed publication in Nature. And you can see that she's achieved over 2,000 views and more than 4,000 downloads of this data set. So to acknowledge this fantastic achievement, we interviewed Nadia and published her story on our community platform and on social media channels to show her motivations for publishing data that could hopefully inform and inspire others to follow her lead. So other community stories that we like to share, we have any recognition of service or retirement articles, any other community initiatives that people should be aware of, cross-institutional collaborations. We also share the latest on repository features about the GitHub integration we have and the upcoming GitLab integration, as well as any vacancies or opportunities to join the team. And when it comes to reward and recognition, I'm also working with our communications officer, Deirdre Casella, who you can see here in the top left, on an initiative to celebrate data called Your Daily Dose of Data. So every week on a Wednesday morning, we tweet about one of the most recent data sets that have been published from each of the partner institutions. So just to show you an example of the kind of impact that we found this has, here is a data set that was published by a PhD student, Luca Marotta, from the University of Twente on physical fatigue detection in runners. And Luca published his data set on the 29th of March. So you can see there's a bit of a peak in the views. And then we tweeted about it a week later on Wednesday. And you can see now the views are up to 70 on that day. And the downloads are the account of 50. So this kind of social media promotion, I think, really helps to raise the visibility of data sharing and publication. And in a similar vein, we also have a monthly newsletter that goes out at the end of this month. And we have a feature called Did You See These Data Sets, where we feature the top downloaded data sets from the previous month. So these are from the partner institutions, and taking this example here of a UK BD data set, an inventory of research data management policy, you can see here that this was the top downloaded data set back in February. So we've actually included it in the newsletter in March. And then we tweeted about it at the end of March. And you can see that actually the number of downloads have continued to peak throughout the week. So finally, I'd like to share some fair data incentives. So at 4TU Research Data, we have a fair data fund. This is available to researchers from those 3 partner institutions. And researchers can apply for a maximum budget of €3,500 to prepare their data to make it available in 4TU Research Data. We have 2 calls, one that opens in spring and one that opens in autumn. And researchers can apply to implement their metadata standards or documentation of their data sets. They can also apply to the funds to anonymize or aggregate personal or confidential data. They might choose to move from a proprietary to an open source platform, or they can use the funds to create some kind of visualization to help make the data more understandable and reusable to others. And they can also use the funds to promote their data set at an event or conference. And so in the spring this year, we were fortunate to receive 14 applications, of which we could have only fund 6 of those, but we funded 7 researchers in this process. And we have a nice blog article where you can take a look at their plans for the fair data refinement. So you can see the names of the researchers from the different institutions and their disciplines here at the side. So quite a diversity as well of different disciplines. So I'm looking forward to finding out what they do with the funds. And then the final thing I'd like to share is our new fellowship program, which we'll be launching early next year. So this is a global initiative to recruit and embed students from all around the world that are looking for an internship to work with us to champion fair data initiatives and advance our mission and vision. So there are various different projects and the scope is quite flexible, but we really hope that what we can do is allow students and allow researchers that undertake the internship to learn more about open science and fair data. They can inform and drive new developments, learn and practice new skills. Hopefully, if they have an output that could result in a publication, they'll be able to also attend conferences and talk more about this. And hopefully this really helps to boost their CV and open the door to career opportunities within this third space, bridging the gap between researchers, data support, and institutional management. So this is coming soon, watch the space. And on that note, I'm going to wrap up the presentation, say thank you for your attention. There are some quick links here to the information website, our data portal, the community platform. You can subscribe to the mailing list. And if you do want any more information about this community, or if you'd like to join, please feel free to contact me and I would be happy to help. So I will stop sharing.
Thank you, Connie. Looks like there's lots of lessons that I will be wanting to pass on to the data team at our university. So I don't think we have any questions. Oh, wait, here we go. Do you track how the downloaded data is reused if it leads to publications, for instance?
That's a really good question. So what I didn't share is that we do also have a citation count, so we can see when the data was cited by others. But this is a question that's come up within the community a few times now. It would be really nice to know the context of data reuse. So is it downloaded and just looked at, assessed, or is it actually put to use for further publication, for example? So one thing that we would like to do is perhaps, if it's possible, it would require some extra programming, of course, but to have some kind of pop-up box maybe that when an end user visits the data set and downloads it, they can actually say why they're interested in the data. Would they like to reuse it? I mean, it's very difficult to track, but it's also a brilliant question. So thank you very much for that.
We have another question from John. Are the fair data grants funded by the institution or the government or some mysterious data loving person?
I love that, mysterious data loving person. So they are funded by 4TU Research Data. So they're funded by the consortium, which is also a collective consortium of those 3 institutions. So that's where that money comes from. And there's a budget of 40,000 euros for the whole year. So we split that up into 20,000 euros in the spring and 20,000 euros in the autumn, which is why we can only fund a certain number of applications. I hope that answers the question.
Yes, wonderful. That is all we have time for, but thank you, Connie. And obviously, if you have any further questions, you can still put them in the Q&A until the end of the session. I'm sure Connie can have a look at them.
Thank you.
So we're up to our final presentation for this evening, or this evening my time, keep forgetting that we're global. So our last presentation is from Jenny Basford. She is from the British Library, and her presentation is Shared Repositories, Building Multi-Tenancy Repository Services at the British Library. So I will hand over to Jenny to share her screen.
Lovely. Thank you, Dimity. It's nice to see you again. We miss you at the British Library. Okay, I'm just going to quickly share my screen and Can you all see that? Is that okay?
Yes, we can.
Slideshow. Lovely. Okay. Well, so I should just point out, though, Torsten is also here to answer any questions that we might have at the end as well. So I just want to give a kind of quick overview here of what we're about to listen to for the next 15 minutes or so. What we really wanted to share here was not just about, well, not really even about the technology itself per se, because we spoke a lot about that last year, but we wanted to talk about all the lessons that we've learned over the last few years in running this repository service, and also particularly during a pandemic, which I think might have thrown a few spanners in the works in some ways, but also might have, been quite beneficial in other ways in terms of like, remote working and things like that. So this is where we're at. And then I suddenly remembered just before I was about to speak, I didn't include a URL to the repository service anywhere. So it's down there at the bottom, and I'm sure Dimity can pop it in the chat for us as well. But that's where you can find the British Library Shared Repository Service. So our shared repository service was launched in November 2019 after an 18-month project to develop a shared repository service using Samvera Haiku, which is open source, as the software platform for ourselves and the 5 cultural heritage partners that are pictured here. The repository offers what we often call a shop window into our research outputs and provides a single search interface to improve the discovery and the use of that research across all of our partners. So last year, as I mentioned, we gave a paper introducing the Open Repositories community to the service and to the technology, for those who weren't familiar with it already. This year, we'd like to take this opportunity to share our lessons learned in running the repositories and outline our longer term ambitions for the service going forward. So again, we went into some detail last year on Haiku and the features that we and our first development partners, Ubiquity Press, made in last year. So I don't want to go over these in too much detail, but I've popped them up here just so you can see the kinds of things that we've got available. So some of these are being fed into the community via the Advancing Haiku project, which is a Arcadia funded project with ourselves, Ubiquity Press, and the University of Virginia. And the Advancing Haiku folks have produced a poster that's available this year. Go and listen to it if they haven't already presented it, because it's a really interesting project. And so over the last year or so, since we last met you all, we've carried out a competitive procurement to host our repositories for the next 2.5 years. And a result of that, we moved to a new supplier who is co-sector, working with Noche as our development partners. And again, last year we showed this too, but I just wanted to include it again because it kind of gives this really nice overview of the technical infrastructure that sits behind our repository service. And this is the kind of inherent multi-tenancy architecture that Haiku just does out of the box. So you have multiple tenancies, multiple repositories all sitting on one instance. And as you can see here, we have 12 altogether, 6 of which feed into the shared repository service and are available via a shared search, which actually isn't available at the moment, but will be coming back again in the next couple of months as we work on that with our new partners. And then we all have a demo repository each to kind of play in and do training and experiment and see how things work in. So if anything you don't want to put in the live repository and make available via search engines, you can play in the demo one first. Shared repositories, as we've just heard from our previous speakers, and as we all know, are a very perennial topic of discussion within the repository community. So here in the UK, nearly all universities have their own repository, their own staff, and their own developers, whether those are in-house developers or outsourced. Occasionally, the idea that one national body could be doing more to bring these together is mooted, with the general idea that pooling resources, if only technically, could be of some financial benefit to the sector. And that's what we've been trialling for the last few years. And this is one of the earliest UK deployments of Samvera Haiku to deliver a multi-tenancy shared repository service. And I think it might actually be the only one in the UK, certainly. And it's certainly the first one to put this whole shared search layer across the whole top. So over the last few years, we've learned a lot of valuable lessons about the Haiku technically, about what a service can do, and what we need to offer other organisations. And also, just as an aside, how to navigate British Library business processes in a pandemic. And what I can say about that last point is, the only thing I'll say is, however long you think you need, double it at least, if not triple it. It's a very lengthy process. So our services. Now, in some respects, I think the British Library can be considered a repository service provider in terms of hosting a repository and making it available to other organisations. But our intention with the shared service wasn't to really just to deliver a technical tool, but a whole suite of additional kind of scholarly communications and open access management related things that go with that. So in addition to training on the repository itself, obviously, we also give our partners training on open access. In fact, Dimity gave some of that very first training way back when she was our scholarly communications lead in 2019, I think, 2018 maybe. We're also there for our partners whenever they have a range of repository related queries, such as queries about copyright, how to describe a work, if they can use a DOI in a very specific scenario to help out their researchers. Now, in my previous roles as a repository manager in a university, that's not the kind of question I would ever have asked of our service provider, who incidentally was quite often co-sector at quite a lot of the universities that I worked with. And although there are some excellent online communities available to us, much of the discussion, certainly in the UK, tends to focus upon the kind of open access compliance for the UK's Research Excellence Framework, which is something that cultural heritage bodies just don't participate in. So a lot of those kind of very fine-tuned details are just not relevant to these partners. They're also a very different stage, many of them, in terms of universities. So that's not necessarily their main concern. Their main concern is making the things available in the first place. So being there to help them and help embed their repository in their institution is something that I think that the partners have all said they appreciate and that they very much value. So I would say the first lesson learned here was that there really is a need for this kind of service when you go outside of the university sector in the UK, because they've already done a lot of this work themselves. And the other most important thing we found that with the service, but also I would say the whole thing as an entity, is that funding the technical side isn't the trickiest bit for most organisations. And while we helped all our partners populate their repositories initially, for a repository to be truly useful as a place of research, there needs to be at least one person who will continue to update it. And that can be shared amongst people, obviously, but it needs to be constantly kind of updated and maintained. Now, some of our partners have found that you can integrate that work into existing roles, but if there's no capacity available for those people, and let's be honest, in the cultural heritage sector, most people are doing at least 2 jobs as it is, and a new position needs to be created. And getting the funding for this, one of our partners has told us, is so difficult. And particularly the last year has really hit our cultural heritage organisations very severely, from having to be closed for the loss of revenue due to the pandemic and subsequent lockdowns. So this kind of thing, the kind of funding for the ongoing human side of it rather than the technical side of it, is something that we're very keen on working on. And we're engaging with one of the UK national research funders to address this side of the repository service to make it sure it lasts. We've also tried to make our repository service into a community of sorts. So we're all organisations that work together already elsewhere, so we had a very good foundation to build upon. It's been harder over the last year because of the obvious, and many of our partners being furloughed, but we've worked with them where we can. So we've given presentations together, and now because we've moved repository hosts and we have a lot of more testing to do, as they've been able to come back to work, our partners are very keen to help test, which is absolutely wonderful. And it wasn't a position that they were in, say, in 2018. That was something that the work was mostly placed upon the BL. And obviously we look at it first, but it's really great that they're so actively engaged now and really want to make the most of it and get it up and running as soon as possible, because they want to use it as soon as possible. So that's been a really important service finding. And as for the technology, from a technical perspective, one of the things that drew us to Haiku, and it has been demonstrated throughout both instances that we've had of Haiku, it's quite wonderful, the architecture, that it is 6 repositories in one tenant, so in one instance rather. So you update 1, you update 6 altogether. So it's a lot more cost effective in that way. You're not having to go in and run updates on one potentially very highly customized repository and then go into the next, and then the next, and then the next. You issue, the service provider kind of deploys the upgrade and it's available to all of us simultaneously. So we really enjoyed that kind of side of it. We've faced 2 major learning curves in Haiku, I would say, technically. So the first was our pilot phase with Ubiquity, when we were both new to the product and were kind of opened it up properly and found just how simple everything was behind the scenes. And we both had to put in this huge amount of work in order to kind of make it suitable for our needs. So a lot of the stuff that we've listed already were kind of value added, if I can say that. Like we only had 2 work types, things like that. It just wasn't suitable for describing the kinds of things that we wanted to put in the repository. We also found some of the things out of the box that didn't work quite as either of us expected. Now, I don't know if that was user error on our part, highly likely, but also there were just some things that didn't quite work as well. And that was version 1 of Haiku, and there is now version 3 of Haiku that's available. So since 2018, we've come quite a long way for the software itself. Our other huge learning point, I really want to highlight this because the British Library has rightly been critiqued for this, is that no matter what timeline we set, we would always fill it because the work always just took as long as it took, which was often quite lengthy, which meant we didn't allocate enough time or any time for our developers to feed their features back to the community. And we should have been doing that. We should have enforced that earlier on. We should have built that into our timelines, and we didn't. So, but we've already started that in our kind of new development phase, and Notch8 have already begun to feed back some of the developments into the core product. And as I've mentioned, the Advancing Haiku project is working on making sure that the other things are going to be integrated as well. And the second huge learning curve that we're just going through now is migrating not just to a new supplier, but to version 3 as opposed to version 1, because the migration meant going to a vanilla Haiku version 3 from a highly customized Haiku version 1. So we've lost all of these nifty features that we used to have because we failed to feed them back. So we're focusing on restoring these now. And in an ideal world, we would have had both suppliers running systems simultaneously in parallel, but this wasn't an option due to the COVID-related delays internally, which meant we couldn't have our 2 contracts overlapping. So that's something that we've really taken away from that, and I've just strongly advised nobody does what we've just had to do. But it focuses the mind significantly when you've got just 6 weeks to get your repository up and running again. And what I really want to say is that, and that both of us have said this when I asked Notch8 and CoSector how they felt about the repository, in the migration, has it really helped being active and engaged people on each side of the project? And they said yes, definitely, particularly because some of the previous repository was a proprietary code, so they weren't able to look at that and kind of copy it directly because it's not open source in parts. So they've had to really kind of drill down and really ask us exactly what we want and what's the behavior we expect here and this, that and the other. And then likewise, they take everything that we say and they just do it. So they've been really great and enthusiastic in that regard as well. And because they're the product owners, Notch8 of Haiku for the community, we've been picking their brains about how things have changed from version 1 to version 3.
2 minutes.
Lovely, thank you. So what we've learned is that we don't necessarily have to recreate exactly what we had in the previous instance. We're really excited to explore these new developments available to us in version 3 that we can harness. And then finally, our next steps, our longer term hopes and dreams for the repository is the first one that we are really, really excited about is that we are about to start work on our kind of second thematic, what Torsten always calls a conglomeration, which I think is just a very nice way of describing it, working with the National Health Service, which is a pilot repository, shared repository that's going to be funded by Health Education England. So this is 6 NHS trusts or hospitals, all in England, that are feeding into one repository. And we think that using Haiku version 3 has some more developments that have been kind of finessed and improved that are really going to help making that a lot easier technically. And if that works, that would be really wonderful for organizations to have a much more cost-effective kind of shared repository where they all share branding together. So the NHS branding is a very strong one in the UK, and it means that all of these organizations can share that and fit within it. It may not work for people like our cultural heritage partners who all have very distinctive, I don't know if you can hear the screaming that's going on outside. That's my next door neighbour's little girl who's very happy about the sunshine. So we've got the NHS coming up. We've just seconded an NHS librarian to help us with that, which I'm super happy about because he's an expert in all things medical and NHS librarian stuff. So, and he has experience with repositories. So that's going to be wonderful. We are really pleased to be working with CoSector and Notch8, and our further developments that we're the things that we had in the old repository, we want to have in our new one. So they will be feeding those back in, and there's more developments to come as well on top of what we had. And then of course, we get to continue to work with Ubiquity on the Advancing Haiku project. So we're just super pleased to be continuing to work with them on that as well. So we're continuing to work on the service. We're open to potential new partners joining this year. Do get in touch if you think you might be interested in joining us. Also, if you're just interested in using Haiku or you just want to hear what it's like or have a little play in like the demo repository or something like that, you're very welcome to get in touch with us and see what we can do there. And I would say also the Samvera community is incredibly active online, very welcoming, and there are lots of regular meetings for both techie and non-techie people alike. So I strongly recommend that you kind of come along and meet us all. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jenny. It's wonderful to see what's been happening in the past couple of years, and I really appreciate the real critical reflection on the experience. So we are sort of at time, but if someone has a question they would like to put forward, I'm sure we can squeeze it in. Otherwise, I'm sure you'd be happy for people to get in touch directly with any questions they might have.
Yeah, of course.
Wonderful. Okay. Well, thank you. If I can just get you to stop screen sharing.
Yes, there we go.
I was
like going, where's the stop share button? It's different in every program, isn't it?
I'm going to do the obligatory thank you to the sponsors. So that was a really amazing session. I want to thank our speakers for their time. It was really interesting. I have learned a lot. So thank you to our sponsors. As you can see, we've got quite a few. This could not happen without them. And I guess, yes, see you in the next time zone. I believe the next session is happening in 2 hours' time, resuming with the poster Minute Madness and also some very exciting panel sessions lined up that will be happening while I'm sleeping, but I look forward to catching up with them when they're recorded and up online. I want to thank everyone for joining us today, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.